Welcome to the Pushing Beauty podcast. This is Michelle Diavella, and these are words from my soul. Someone recently asked me to write or talk about being friends with your ex. Should I be friends with my ex? I couldn't find the exact question. It was on Instagram somewhere buried in my DMs. But essentially, that's what she was asking. She was having a really hard time with an ex and felt like she needed to be friends with him or wanted to be friends with him, but it was hard. And she remembered that I had written an article once about being friends with my ex and all the beautiful lessons I learned from it. So I don't think that everyone should be friends with their exes. And it's a little bit of a complicated topic, and I'm going to do my best. The article that I had written several years ago now, it was 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I dated a guy, and we, at the time, felt a strong connection. There were some reasons why it wasn't really working, and we kind of did this like little bit of on again, off again thing. But essentially, we were never officially we maybe were officially in a relationship for like a day, but we cared very deeply for each other and spent a lot of time together, and had dated for a little bit, had dated for maybe a month or two, and then realized like it wasn't really working. There were some difficulties. Neither of us really wanted to let it go, but we kind of knew we needed to. And so we did not have very firm boundaries when we decided just to be friends. And so things got like a little bit messy, but underneath it all, we cared a lot about each other. I will say that at the time, I ended up cutting him out of my life for a period of time and like had him come and collect his things. And it was very dramatic and, awkward, I think, for him. And somehow we got back in touch. I don't know. I maybe had reached back out to him, and like communication started again, and we got together and like talked about things and became friends. And it was a really big learning experience for me at the time, because there was a lot of stuff that I really wasn't willing to look at or interested in looking at in relationship to him. So, the fact that it wasn't working out, and for me, it was much easier for me to just draw a line and cut him out of my life than it was for me to have some difficult conversations with him and explore, what was actually happening between us. And so we did, and like I learned a lot and developed a beautiful friendship through it. And, he and I both went on to date other people and would go on double dates together, and he got married, and I was a groomswoman in his wedding and became close with his wife. And so the relationship completely changed, and I don't look at him anymore as somebody that I dated. I don't think about him as like an ex or anything like that. He's just a friend. And so the relationship transformed in that way. And I definitely have other people in my life who I've been friendly with. Like I've been in like a 3-year relationship with a guy who, like, on our birthdays, we'll kind of text each other or like reach out to each other every once in a while. And so like we're friends, or we're like friendly with each other, but I don't like hang out with him or spend time with him. He doesn't live anywhere near me, but like we didn't really continue a friendship in that way. And I've had other people who I've dated for, have had substantial relationships with, like fell in love with them, and the relationship ended, and we have no communication, but we're not on bad terms, but we just don't speak. And then, there's the relationship that I was in where I was blindsided and he left, and I wrote a book about it. And that was like over 2 years ago. And I've had no communication with him whatsoever. And am happy about that. I don't want to be in communication with him. I don't really want him in my life. That's not to say that if he reached out to me and like had something he needed to say to me, of course I would hear it. But my point is that whether or not you're friends with your ex has a lot to do with who you are, where you're at in your life, who your ex is, where they're at in their life, and what kind of relationship you've had. So for example, if you have kids with somebody, you need to figure out a way to be friends with your ex. I think it's incredibly important. I think it can be incredibly difficult. Being in communication with somebody who has hurt us, usually it's about that, right? If we're having a hard time being in communication with an ex and being friends with an ex, it's usually because we feel hurt or slighted in some way. And so to me, if you have a child with somebody, it's a really wonderful opportunity for you to learn a lot about yourself through this dynamic and this relationship. If you don't, I would suggest asking yourself why you feel you need to be friends with this person or need to transition the relationship into a friendship. I think that some people do this very naturally and they do it very well and it works for them. I think for other people, it can be very difficult to let go. And for me personally, that's one of the things for me that I have struggled with in relationships. When relationships have ended, it's been very hard for me to let go of the fact that this person is like the most important person in my life. And now that it's over, they're not in my life at all. And to me, it feels like a death. It has felt like a death. And I will actually link in the show notes to an article I wrote about a relationship, not the blindsiding one. It was a different relationship. And it's called Knowing You, the Breakup Story. And it's essentially like a poem / stream of consciousness kind of, little story, basically about the process of letting go of love, letting go of somebody who's become a big part of your life. And essentially what I get to in that article is that even if they're not in your life, like physically or present in your actual day-to-day life, they're always a part of you, because we become transformed. We become new when we fall in love with somebody, when we integrate our lives with another person. And then when we leave that relationship, it's really painful because we have to become even newer. We need to become now, who are we now that we've been imprinted by this person and changed? We're not going to be who we were before we met them. And we're not going to continue to be who we were in relationship to them, but we're going to be something new. And that process of integrating into who we are now can be really uncomfortable. And I think a lot of times that's why we hold on to the desire to be friends with somebody, because it feels a little bit easier. One of the things that I had done this conscious uncoupling thing actually after this particular relationship that I wrote this article about with Catherine Woodward Thomas. And one of the things that she said as like a final step, it was like the end of this workshop, that really impacted me was that if you're transitioning from a romantic partnership to a friendship, you have to remove all specialness from that relationship. So that means that you don't get to have inside jokes anymore. You don't get to keep the past alive that kept you special to one another. When we're making ourselves very special to one another, which is one of the really beautiful things about being in a romantic partnership, we're keeping that alive and we're not allowing ourselves to actually move on. So for example, if you have your former partner over for lunch and they go sit on your bed, in the bedroom, or they go help themselves to food in the fridge like they normally would, it's keeping this old dynamic alive. And so when I read that, or when I listened to that, it made me realize that I didn't actually want to be friends with my ex. I didn't actually want a new relationship where we were like, platonic. I wanted the specialness. I wanted to keep the specialness alive. And so when I recognized that that's what I actually wanted, I knew that it wasn't really important for me to spend the time and energy to try to become friends, to work through all of the stuff that I needed to work through to become friends with this person. Actually, the lesson and the work for me was in letting go of him. and all of the hymns that I've been with and loved and walked away from, or had them walk away from me. All of that for me is about learning to let go and learning to embrace the process of becoming new again. So I'd ask you to ask yourself what your intention is in wanting to be friends with your ex. And if it feels really hard for you and you're going through a lot of stuff that needs to be gone through for you to grow as a human, it might be something worth exploring. But it's something that both of you have to agree on. You both have to be willing to kind of navigate this period with one another, because it can be really challenging. And it's going to be especially challenging when one of you starts to date somebody else. And then you're going to, navigate that territory. I think if you are choosing to become friends with your ex, the most important thing you need to do in the beginning is have very, very, very clear boundaries and have communication around what kind of boundaries you're creating. And if you're sleeping with each other, or again, keeping some specialness alive, things could very easily and most likely will get messy at a certain point. It's pretty much inevitable. So, ask yourself why you're doing it. What are your intentions? Are you trying to keep the specialness alive? Or is there something that you really need to learn? I think for a lot of us, it's about learning to let go and learning to honor the relationship as it was, instead of trying to hold on to the little bits and pieces that might still be left. So if you happen to have any questions that you would like me to talk about on the podcast, I'm happy to hear from you. You can shoot me an email at hello@pushingbeauty.com, or you can head over to the show notes, and there's a form on that page as well. And I will link to all of the things that I spoke about, including Catherine Woodward Thomas's Conscious Uncoupling, which I think she has a book now, which could be helpful for some of you. And I also have a lot of resources on healing after the end of a relationship that I will also link there. Thank you so much for being here with me, and hope to have you next time.